When somebody says German armor, we immediately think about Panthers, Tigers, the glorious Tiger II, and that's hardly surprising. They're all iconic vehicles. But if we start to tell the tale of the Panzerwaffe from the very beginning, we can't overlook the fast beasts of Blitzkrieg, Panzers. Let's talk about them. You get a reserve Panzer III at the very start of the tech tree. For the sake of coherence, though, let's begin our journey with the earliest Panzer II variations. Say hi to the Panzerkampfwagen II Ausf. Its premium variant, the Panzer II-C DAC. This is a light tank with decent mobility and a 20mm gun, which is punchy enough to deal with most opponents with a couple of hits, and has a pretty good rate of fire to boot. And if that wasn't as quick-firing as you'd like, take a look at the Aus F. Its gun has a fire rate that is almost twice as high. Be careful though, tanks of these series don't have much in terms of protection. Okay, now we're cleared to talk about the Panzer III tanks. And boy, are there many of them. The earliest model at your disposal is the Ausf B, which will teach you all you need to know about the strengths and the flaws of the Panzer III series on the whole. The biggest problem is that it makes use of manual turret traverse, and it's really slow. Its biggest asset is its great survivability, first because of a crew of 5, and on later models because of decent army configurations. At the same time, its gun gives it enough firepower and has high enough fire rate to let it deal with the bulk of its opponents in early matches, and it has access to an APCR round, which is a plus, especially when engaging at considerable range. Then we have the Panzer III-E, which comes with a lot of changes. It was fitted with torsion bar suspension with 6 road wheels on each side. Moreover, the hull machine gun received a ball mount. The driver was given a periscope and a protected vision port, and the armor on this batch of Panzer III tanks was thickened to 30mm. During 1940 and 1941, some of those vehicles were upgunned with 50mm KWK-38 cannons. Those tanks are known as the Panzer III-F. With new gun came new rounds, including a very potent APCR. On the other hand, you still have to deal with that horrid turret traverse of 5.5 degrees per second. Ooh. All of that, good and bad, the turret, the gun, the ammo selection are present in the J variation as well. At the same time, the Ausf J got a sturdier mantlet and better protection in the front, with armor that was around 50mm thick. The J1 and L variations were initially all about trying to outfit a Panzer III with a Panzer IV turret along with its 75mm long-barrel gun. To be fair, it wasn't a complete failure. You can find a Panzer III with a shortish gun of this caliber in the premium section of the tree, the Panzer III-N. The turret was not an easy graft though, and eventually the idea was abandoned. What the tanks got instead was a new mantlet with additional offset armor. The Panzer III-L received 20mm thick armor plates on the front of the hull, and its turret on top of that. Naturally, all of that led to an increase in weight, to 22.5 tons to be exact. On the other hand, it got faster turret traverse, 14 degrees per second. It's hardly record-breaking, but that's already something. The last modification of this Panzer is the Ausf M. It comes with mortars for launching 90mm NBK smoke grenades, and side skirts that were meant to protect the tank from glancing heat projectiles. You won't run into any opponents using heats at this BR, but this additional protection is far from useless. Early Soviet rounds would often detonate when coming in contact with your skirts, instead of actually hitting your armor. Let's move on to the Panzerkampfwagen 4. Broadly speaking, those Panzers are on the bigger and the slower side. On the other hand, even the earliest of them are equipped with 75mm cannon. It doesn't have the longest barrel, but has access to very powerful heat rounds. The first Panzer IV variant you get is the Panzerkampfwagen 4 Ausf C. This tank comes with a nice selection of rounds and good mobility. Furthermore, it only takes the gun 3.3 seconds to reload. At the same time, this vehicle can't offer much in terms of armor. A problem solved in the next model, the Ausf E. Its turret and side armor is 20mm thick almost everywhere. That's 5mm thicker than on the previous model. And there are additional armor plates, all 20mm thick, installed on the sides as well. The front was also fortified with some good old RHA. This type of add-on armor, though, was not terribly effective at increasing the vehicle's survivability. It was considered a temporary solution anyway. A more profound armor upgrade brought us the F1 model. In the front, its armor thickness was increased to more respectable 50mm. The F2 variation's most distinctive feature is a new, more powerful gun, the KWK-40 L43 cannon that can reliably annihilate nearly every single tank that you can run into, even though some of your enemies might get lucky once or twice with their fancy sloped armor. Even with the new gun, the tank is still very mobile. It comes also with new means of protection in the form of a 5-shooter smoke grenade launcher and some additional armor in the glacis area. The next variation, the Panzer 4G, has even more armor, 80mm in the front. Still not enough to feel safe on the battlefield, though. It makes use of a double baffle muzzle brake and, unlike its predecessors, comes with smoke launchers positioned on either side of the turret. But the most common variant of the Panzer IV is the Ausf H, which was a subject to many upgrades. To start with, the tank's 80mm front glacis armor was made as a single piece. Furthermore, the vertical surfaces of the armor got Zimmerit paste coating to protect the vehicle from magnetic anti-tank mines. Not to mention that the tank was also covered head to toe in 5mm thick-spaced armor skirts. Then there was also an electric motor powering the tank's turret traverse, allowing for the much faster traverse rate of 14 degrees per second. Taking into account all changes to the design, this model is the most heavily modified Panzer IV in the game. The J variation is almost a direct opposite. It was built as a result of the efforts to create a version of the tank that would be as cheap to produce as possible. Germans didn't have as many resources later on in the war after all. The engineers behind the project removed the powered traverse, once again giving the tank the traverse rate of 6 degrees per second. Parts of its spaced armor kit had to be dropped also. At least you still have a full set on the premium version, so there is that. In a way, the history of this tank family mirrors the history of the Nazi Germany itself, starting with a massive breakthrough with vehicles that were both fast and powerful. Through a number of developments, it eventually went into decline, just as the Reich lost more and more of its ground. A tank of the Panzerkampfwagen family isn't just a tank, it's a bit of the world's history in the form of a vehicle. And then we made digital copies of that history in War Thunder, so that you can relive the epic tale of this tank family yourself. Do you enjoy driving Panzers in battle? Are there any epic stories to share? Do tell us in the comments below.